Have you ever stopped and wondered about America's first war? And no, I'm not talking about the World Wars or even the Civil War. I mean, the very first time the brand new United States went to war with a foreign power. Well, today, we're diving into that exact story, using a really fascinating historical account from Christopher Hitchens. And believe me, it's a story that might just change how you think about American history.
So, who was it? Go ahead, take a guess. Was it the British, coming back for round two? Maybe another big European empire? Well, the answer is probably not what you're thinking, and it takes us to a part of the world that very few people expect.
Okay, picture this. The year is 1788. The United States is this tiny, fledgling nation, barely a decade old, still trying to figure out its place in the world. And almost right out of the gate, it's staring down a huge, terrifying crisis. But not from Europe. No, this threat was coming from the high seas.
I mean, just look at this timeline. Only 12 years, 12, after declaring independence, American merchant ships are being hijacked, their sailors are being captured, and worse, sold into slavery. And this wasn't just a few random attacks, oh no. This was part of a huge, systematic piracy campaign that had been terrorizing the Mediterranean for decades. For the little U.S., this was a massive threat to its economy and to the lives of its people.
So, where was all this coming from? Well, that's what's so wild. These weren't your typical rogue pirates acting on their own. The attacks were actually state-sponsored. They were directed by the Barbary states of North Africa, places like Tripoli, Algiers, and Tunis, which were all kind of part of the bigger Ottoman Empire. This was organized, government-sanctioned aggression.
And the scale of this whole operation, it's just staggering. Look at this number. Historians figure that as many as 1.5 million Europeans and Americans were captured and enslaved during this time. This was not some minor annoyance. It was a full-blown humanitarian crisis and an economic nightmare.
So before jumping straight to war, the United States did what you'd expect. They tried diplomacy. They sent two of their absolute sharpest minds, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, over to London. Their mission was pretty simple: meet with the ambassador from Tripoli and figure out why the heck this was happening and, get them to stop.
And you can just imagine Jefferson and Adams making their case, right? They were completely baffled. They basically said, look, we're the new kids on the block here. We have zero history of fighting with you. We weren't involved in the Crusades or any of that old stuff. So why are you attacking us? From where they stood, it was totally, completely unprovoked.
And this is the exact moment where the whole story just takes a sharp turn. The Americans walk into this meeting thinking they're going to negotiate about trade or territory or paying some kind of tribute, the usual political stuff. But the ambassador from Tripoli, a guy named Abdul Rahman Aja, he gave them an explanation that was, well, it was something else entirely.
I mean, really, what reason could he possibly give? What could justify attacking a nation that, by all accounts, hadn't done a single thing to them? The answer he gave didn't just shock Jefferson and Adams, it would literally change the entire course of American foreign policy.
According to the official report Jefferson and Adams sent back to Congress, the ambassador's reason was brutally, shockingly direct. He said the attacks were happening, quote, because the Quran gives us permission to do so, because you are infidels. So the reason wasn't political, it wasn't economic. It was stated explicitly and without apology as a religious one.
For Thomas Jefferson, that was it. That was the game changer. I mean, if the motivation is ideological, if it's based on a belief that you see as non-negotiable, what's left to talk about? He realized right then and there that diplomacy was useless. The only answer left was force. And that decision led directly to the First Barbary War, the very conflict that gives the U.S. Marine Corps its famous hymn, "To the Shores of Tripoli."
You can just trace his thought process perfectly here. Step 1, try for peace. Be reasonable. But then, step 2, you get a justification for war that's absolute, based on religious law. So step 3, you conclude that talking is a dead end. And that leaves only one option on the table in his mind. Step 4, you fight back.
And Jefferson's response was just as blunt as the ambassador's had been. And remember, this is the guy who was always super suspicious of having a big, expensive, standing military. But now he basically says, okay, fine. If that's your reason, then I will build a navy, I'll send it all the way across the ocean, and I will crush your state. And that is exactly what he started to do.
So you might be thinking, okay, interesting history lesson, but why are we talking about a 200-year-old war? Well, because for Christopher Hitchens, this isn't just ancient history. He uses this whole story to make a really powerful and pretty controversial argument that connects directly to the world we live in right now.
And this quote right here, this is the absolute core of his thesis.
Hitchens argues, Islamic fundamentalism is not created by American democracy. It's a lie to say so. It's a masochistic lie. The Barbary War? For him, that's Exhibit A.
So here's how Hitchens connects the dots. He's really pushing back against the idea you hear a lot today, that modern conflicts are all because of U.S. foreign policy. He says, hey, look back at this war. This happened before the U.S. was a superpower, before any American involvement in the Middle East. And the reason they gave at the time was purely ideological. So, he says, for modern Americans to blame themselves for this kind of aggression is what he calls a masochistic lie. It's a self-defeating falsehood that, in his view, ends up blaming the victim and letting the actual aggressors off the hook.
And that kind of leaves us with a really big question to chew on. Whether you agree with Hitchens' final conclusion or not, this forgotten bit of history really makes you think. How do these origin stories, these accounts of a nation's first enemies, end up shaping how we see the world and the conflicts we face today? It's just a powerful reminder that sometimes the oldest stories have the most to teach us about right now